Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, here with my brother-in-arms, Tanner Wayland, and today we are being joined by a very special guest, Alex Aries. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll let him introduce himself a little bit in a second. The goal of today's show is to help you tell better stories as you DM sessions of D&D, and obviously we want to immerse ourselves in the story, and you want your players to have an extremely positive effect. But to immerse yourself, or to have them immerse them, it requires a lot of work. And really, how do you do that? So that's the question we're going to talk about today with Alex. So just to get started, Alex, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, I'm Alex Aries. I'm the co-founder of Gameplay Candles. It's a scented candle company with scents designed for D&D tabletop adventures. I've been a DM of 5th edition adventures since 2014. And my day job is that of a manufacturing engineer. So whenever I'm producing widgets to sell, I feel right at home. At least as much there as I do around the gaming table.
That's awesome.
Wow, yeah. That's like a perfect match, it feels like, you know?
Yeah, it's a very natural evolution.
Well, like I said, our topic today is immersion. And so the first question I have, and obviously Tanner has a full load of questions on his own, and if you have any questions that you'd like us to talk about, feel free and bring up. But the first question I have is, where do you start when trying to create more immersion for your players?
Gosh, yeah, I think that there's no single prong in the front, as it were, around your gaming table, but I do like to design my immersion with my players in mind. And I think as a good DM, you're there to sort of chaperone and curate an experience in a story that everyone can contribute to. But being a DM, you have this unique opportunity to bring a little extra pizzazz to the table. So I look at the players and look at their interests and their characters, and I think that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Could you, this might be a little bit hard off the top of your head, but do you have any examples to kind of show the audience a little bit?
Show. I could.
Sorry, not. Metaphorically show the audience through our words.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No problem. We have a barbarian in one of my campaigns that I had previously DM'd, and part of their backstory involved a very specific description of their life on the plains as a nomad with their nomadic tribe, and I found a food recipe that might be considered that of nomadic peoples. It's like a flatbread, so there's no leavening or anything like that. So
great.
Just sort of I made that. I like to cook a lot. I'm a bit of a gourmand, but I made that and just called it, Tara's flatbread or whatever, and that was her character's name. So yeah, it's just sort of incorporating her character into the night as a whole.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
That's really cool.
I love that,
Yeah.
especially because I think that nowadays, I don't know, people kind of expect snacks at a lot of the gaming, like anytime they come to the table for a session. But we always think, oh, what's easy? Just some snacks from the store, mass-produced Doritos or whatever else it is, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, and some people take the step further where they actually make like desserts or snacks. And I love that you didn't just be like, hey, I baked bread, enjoy. But like, you were like, hey, here's they're from a nomadic tribe. Like this
Yeah.
is what they'd be eating. Let's bring you into
Yeah,
the
I mean,
world.
and you can even you can even take those Doritos and just pour them into a bowl and call it something on brand for your adventure, and that just
Exactly.
creates an extra memory point that makes the night sort of stand out.
It's true. Like
Yep.
I think that you could take anything, and it'd be funny, in fact, and I think that'd be a blast to like come up with a way that each random snack that gets brought somehow plays into something.
Yeah, yeah. That'd be like a great little tradition to have at the start of any game.
I know. I
sure.
totally agree. So I had another question about immersion. And this is kind of like a little bit of a question about how you got started with, gameplay candles. Before you started it, did you use a lot of candles in your gameplay, like in your sessions, to set ambiance?
Not in my sessions, but I was a big fan of scented candles in general. And then I discovered the next layer, that being fantasy-inspired scented candles.
Yes.
And there are a plethora of companies out there doing good stuff in that realm, but none of them were like specific to D&D. Or specific to like the classes or the characters or settings you might find in a D&D adventure. And since that was already such a big part of my life, I just sort of naturally fell into it. That, and I was spending way too much money on some really nice scented candles, so I thought I could do it cheaper, and it was good enough that people wanted them and were interested. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And so now, well, I'm just curious, how often are you playing D&D nowadays?
I have a weekly session. I actually met with the group last night, and I DM'd a one shot so our DM could. I should say I've been a forever DM, except in the past I'd say 6 weeks. I've now been a player character for the first time in almost 9 years.
Congrats!
Wow.
Yeah, that's
It's
Well,
a
tell
big
us-
thing.
yeah.
You gotta tell us about your character now. Like,
Oh,
this is
man.
like a big thing,
Well, as an engineer, obviously I went with artificer, and so I am an armor artificer named Arturo Ironheart, and I'm a 55-year-old bitter man who has one leg amputated, but you can't tell because of my armor, and yeah, it's funny. One of the things that really stood out to me as a player character instead of a DM is you don't know everything, which sounds like readily obvious and apparent, but I made the mistake of assuming details of the perceived bad guys and just went in swinging, and then afterwards my DM, who's bless his heart, he's DMing for the first time, and I pulled this. But I just go in, and it was a full murder hobo rampage. And it was like, you didn't even ask what they looked like. It was like policemen. I killed, like, the town guards. I thought they were bandits. But anyway, yeah,
And one of them, it was
it
the
is
last
fun.
day before they retired. They were excited
one
to
of
go home
them-
with their family.
No, one of them was the king's brother, so that sort of
course.
altered the entire arc of the campaign. But, if it's his first time DMing, I feel like it's appropriate to throw a little murder hoboism, his
Yeah.
way. Keep him on his toes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like certain DMs would kind of create that scenario on purpose just to see what the players would do, and
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Although, once I get to know a group pretty well, I fear to give them enough rope to hang themselves with, you know?
Right.
Right,
Depends
yeah.
on if you're a nice DM or a normal DM. But being in kind of the fortunate situation you are, a forever DM who is now being a player, how does immersion change with the change in roles? So what are kind of, in your opinion, in a perfect world, what are the responsibilities for players to create immersion, or what can they do versus what does a DM do?
Yeah, that's a great question. This sort of goes to my general philosophy on what makes a successful game night. I call it the game night trifecta. There's role play, there's combat, and discovery. And I think your podcast mentioned this in a previous episode. One of your friends who's a writer, I think, it described 4 things. It was like combat, role play, puzzles, and discovery, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that was Rob,
I feel like that
maybe?
was Rob.
Yeah, and that just really rang true with me, although I just keep it down to 3. I would put puzzles and discovery because game night tetrahedron just doesn't have the same ring to it, But as a player, I think role play really falls on your shoulders. Not only yourself, like an individual player, but all the players there. Obviously, the DM will touch each one of those things and probably controls combat and discovery a bit more. But for the players, that's 4 to 6 people around the table who's not the DM, and they would create the bulk of the role play, if you ask me. So in terms of immersion, keeping that role play consistent and at least, making the attempt to make, those fun memories around the table would be something you can still control very easily.
Yeah, I like that a lot because, I think if a DM doesn't really encourage their players to participate in the role play and even, prepare things beforehand, then you're putting all of the immersion on yourself as a DM, and that just doesn't work. Same as how combats are very boring if the players aren't bringing their own energy to it. Same for the role playing. Like right now, this is leading up to a question for you, Alex. But right now, Justin and I we're working with Rob, in fact, on a homebrew, and we're as part of it, we're including DM tips and everything like that for new DMs to kind of branch out in their style. And I had a tip about flashbacks or kind of mental visions that only are about one player, And I think I've seen those done a couple different ways. I've seen it where the DM just kind of describes it and describes everything. It's in the vision, you're in a cafe, and then suddenly a stranger comes up to you and they say this and you say that, and it they play out everything. And
a cutscene.
A cutscene, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And then I've seen the other way where it's a cutscene. However, they've either informed the player beforehand, and the player's they essentially scripted it to some extent, right? And or they just or they make it a kind of cutscene or flashback or vision that's interactive with that player, and those are always so much better, in my opinion. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think when you are creating key moments in a story's development, I'd be very hesitant to not include the players, even if it's a little more work or a little less convenient. No one signed up to be a DM because it's super easy and convenient, Exactly. So, that reminds me of this one thing actually that happened around my table where the group was heading into the final area of a dungeon that had a demon lord in it, and before we got into the final antechamber, we decided to take a break. But that was all planned because during the break, I sent out pre-written slacks from the demon to each individual character, and that was how I had a flashback, or in this case, it was just a mental telekinetic conversation, just awesome. One-on-one with the players, where he tried to tempt them to, betray or whatnot, and drew elements from their backstories and everything to sort of make things really difficult for them to choose. But yeah, that break lasted a little longer as I texted out the back and forth. But yeah, that was good.
If we can, I'd like to kind of narrow in on this thing because I think this is an excellent moment to actually kind of talk about a specific tool, a specific instance. So in this instance, I'm guessing you're DMing online. You have a Slack channel, is that right?
Yeah, at the time we were using Slack to communicate. Yeah.
And then, did you pre-write all of these texts, or did they kind of come in the moment? How did all that work out?
So I pre-wrote the first contact from the Demon Lord to them, with like spelling out the pros of betraying your companions and receiving whatever tempting gift or treasure I was offering them. But over the course of that break, they would text back, and that was them telekinetically or telepathically communicating, and so that was all generic, or that was all organic. It was not pre-scripted.
Oh, that's excellent. See, I think I like this one particularly because we are all attached to our phones by the hip or our computers, as it were, and you have someone messaging you real time.
Yep.
There's your response, and then there's a wait time. It feels very real. Have you guys seen, or of course, you probably have Deal or No Deal, right?
Sure.
Yep.
So there's the guy up in the booth who's coming up with whatever offer. They have a software that comes up with exactly what he needs to say, but there's a guy up there because you see him moving around. It's his job to sit up there, look like he's writing stuff down, picking up a phone and calling. But it is very immersive, and it adds to the mystique of the game. Other than our computer spat out this number, what do you think?
Yeah.
So, and I know this is very myopic. It's very focused in on one particular instance, but I think this is a good kind of use case for immersion. How might you kind of replicate this in an in-person setting?
Oh, well, I should say that previous example, we were all in person, but
oh wow!
But you also have
okay,
Slack.
Gotcha.
But we have we Slack to communicate outside the game and whatnot. But in this instance, I used it in the game. But
excellent.
Yeah. So if I understand your question, you're asking like in person, how would you add to that?
I guess I guess you answered it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, in a break, I don't want everyone looking at me, texting them all. But I'm guessing, everyone was going around eating some food, talking for a second. They'd get a ping, answer it real quick, put their phone back, right?
I mean, it was obvious. Everyone got a ping at once, when I sent out the first round. But people knew, when you have the right set of players, they also play the game. So they weren't like metagaming outside, But it's funny. One of the main challenges is actually getting that immersive feeling when you're not meeting in person. I much prefer the in-person games because it's easier, at least as a DM from my standpoint, to bring immersive elements in. I always view immersion through the lens of the five senses, and it's really difficult to bring that when everyone's sitting in different houses in front of a screen. So yeah, I don't know, it's much easier, I think, if you have it in person.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that opens up an important question, which is like, which of the senses can you affect over the internet?
Yeah,
like I think sound, and that's one that I've always had a hard time with, right? Because that's, if you're, let's say you're using Roll20, not everyone's good at like knowing how to like upload some music and things like that. So, I mean, when you are, I guess my question is, how often do you find yourself running a session just online, and what do you do in those cases?
Man, well, you got the wrong guest tonight for that, because I don't think I've ever run a session online, because my daughter was born in February of 2020, so I already had a reason to drop out of my weekly D&D games.
Yep.
But then, of course, COVID hit, and so like all the aftermath of that still petered out. So I have partook in a few online sessions of D&D, but I never DM'd any of them. Yeah.
Sure. I guess maybe one question that can help all of us is, immersion's really hard to kind of nail down and say, like, I mean, it's easy when you're like, oh, that was immersive, but maybe the question we should ask is, what is not quote unquote immersion or immersive? Like, what do we constantly see that people do that doesn't actually move the needle? Maybe.
Well, I'm almost a little hesitant to bring this up because I don't want to deter anyone from trying to bring immersion in whatever form that would take. But if and this can become part of the joke or the running gag in a game, but there are many DMs where there's one NPC voice. And whether you're a dairy farmer or a librarian, it's the same voice. But I mean, I think that there's a right campaign for that. But
Yes.
if you're if you're a DM and you don't want to do that, then it doesn't take. I don't think it takes a whole lot of practice or effort to like develop 3 unique voices, and that actually goes a long way. For the investment, I think you get the most bang out of your buck when you're doing that, because as a DM, you will be voicing different characters, and so you can just count on that as one of the skills you should probably develop. So, like that would break character, or that would break immersion for some folks around a table. But again, I don't want to deter. I don't want to deter folks from trying. So, any effort should be appreciated by the party.
Yeah,
I agree.
And honestly, kind of talking to that point, Justin, I think an important aspect of immersion is what's it called? I had the word in my head. Consistency. Thank you. But because I think it's consistency, but then also occasional spikes of effort. That's how I would put it. Because if you're consistently playing music at key moments, or at the start of your session, those kind of things are going to help. If you're consistently having some type of artwork, like a landscape, fantasy landscape, or even an image, an artistic depiction of certain NPCs, then that's going to build in, that running dialogue of like, hey, this is a real world that we need to pretend that we're in, versus like doing that maybe in the first session or every 5 sessions or whatever. Then it's it's going to be easy to get out of that because you're not having the kind of the themes, the art, the whole vibe, really hitting you.
That's a great point, Tanner, and it reminds me of another one of the senses you can build themes around is sound around different characters or different settings using the same fantasy music or whatnot, so that it's another thing that gets associated specifically with that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So naturally, being a DM is hard, is tough, and one of our missions is to help make it easier. So open conversation, everyone. What top of the line tools do you know of that would be just the tops in immersion? And then contrast that with what are some cheap or free tools that help immersion a ton. So full spectrum there.
Well, I think that so in terms of free, lots of people or DMs should be able to look around their house and you can find a prop just of whatever. And bringing a prop to the table and letting the players actually touch and hold and everyone seeing the exact same thing, I think that goes a long way, especially around puzzles, actually. So you might consider just props that are easily found to be one of those free things that's out and about. Helps with immersion.
Can we maybe think of like a quick example, maybe a scenario or something that actually happened. Again, just to kind of make it visual for the audience in a way.
Yeah. Well, in one of my adventures recently, they came upon a magically locked box, and I happened to have a metal box that my wife stored some jewelry in or whatnot. And so I just described how it was magically shimmering, and they couldn't open it very easily. And so they were passing around the box and thinking about different ways to get it open, but still had a tactile thing to hold. So I think that was very beneficial.
I like that.
In one of the campaigns I was in, that my cousin was running, for the big main end boss baddie, he had. It's silly, but I remember it very well. He had a giant, not a giant, but on the board it was giant. It was a squeezy toy for like a child that looked like an octopus, and it was like a sea god kind of thing. So it worked perfectly. And he basically created it around this toy because he's like, this is what I got. And it stuck in my head, until this moment. I was like, oh, this is sick. Even if it's a cartoonish thing, it didn't look really threatening at all. But just the size compared to our little minis, I thought it was great.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
Like a Cthulhu chew toy.
It was like, it basically looked like the cutest little octopus, but then you're like, could you imagine if the sizes were exactly like that? That'd be terrifying. No matter how cute and smiley it looks.
Yeah. The best miniatures are the improvised ones, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
And honestly, that kind of like brings up a whole can of worms about minis, like whether or not they are immersive or if they're a crutch or a scapegoat. And if they are immersive, how do you do them right? What do you guys think?
I mean, to my earlier point about just being consistent, I think minis are important for the consistency aspect, because you have a specific player or character rather, and being able to see them on that board or in front of you, it's just a constant reminder that it's like, hey, it's not me just operating some little blip that happens to have numbers attached. It's this character that I've built. So I think it's. I don't think it's as big as some people think, because some people are like, "Oh, it's so expensive" or anything. But it's like you can get some generic ones, and various types, and maybe you end up using the same ones for like the same different characters over the years. But it's still better than just having like a little pawn or something, in my opinion.
So I was a theater of the mind purist for many years, and I looked up the language to paint as clear a picture for the party as possible, and just was able to use my words to describe the battlefield and the layout. And then a few years ago, we introduced Lego miniatures on a very generic grid map, and it was better. It was. For that consistency reason you mentioned, Tanner, it was so much clearer to everybody about the layout of the battlefield. And you can still use all that descriptive language in theater of the mind descriptions. So I'm a convert. I do believe that minis are a good thing for the game. Yeah.
Yeah, and even what you said there about theater of the mind and making sure your language and your words were impactful, I don't want to discount that at all, because I think some people rely too much on the props and the minis and things like that, and they don't prepare their wording and their vocabulary as much as they could, and that is like some good language, like a nice paragraph written about a setting, or to describe a new character, or to describe a key moment. That can do so much. Now, if you tie that in with like an image that you project on a screen, and with their minis being present and stuff, that can only build on it. But I think the cheapest and most effective way you can bring them in is just preparing what you're going to say ahead of time,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's, when I'm preparing a session, I do... I put the font in italics, and whatever's in italics is something that I will read, animatedly to the groove, but it's all pre-written and pre-scripted for those key moments, like you said. Huge impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do the same thing, and it also is nice when you do that. You can couple it with that music from key moments, kind of like we said. I think Tanner, what you said is probably the underscore of tonight's episode. Just whatever you do, if you do it consistently and maybe build on it to what you feel you can do, but again, consistency. Your players are going to come to appreciate that, and it'll help them kind of get in that role-playing mode. I think we're just about out of time, so let's leave the listener with one thing that they can try, each of us. So you think of one thing that you'd recommend them trying or doing this week to work on immersing their players and themselves.
I'll go to give Alex some time to think, but what I would say is kind of write out what your ideal setup would be. And I'm not saying ideal, Matt Mercer, or Dimension 20 kind of setup. I'm saying what would your realistic yet ideal setup be? And then from there, kind of work backwards. Be like, okay, what could I do week to week that isn't too much effort, but can still give the punch that I'm looking for? And it's better to do that versus kind of working from the bottom up, because I think that you'll be able to be more creative that way and look at your resources more realistically, but also creatively.
Excellent.
Nice.
And then, Alex, I'll go, and then you can finish up, and then also tell people how to find you, support you, and see what you're up to after you respond. But I would say, DM, make sure you put yourself on the sacrificial chopping block. If anyone's going to be embarrassed, it better be you, because you're going to get your players buy-in by doing those funny voices or trying that new thing or putting a puzzle out there that might not make sense. If you kind of sacrifice yourself, your players won't feel so self-conscious, and they'll buy into the collective experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I dig that. That's good advice. I have two for you.
Perfect.
So I would say just this week, sometime before your game night, go out and buy a bag of almonds and some olive oil and some spices, and go ahead and find a recipe for spiced nuts and call it something pertinent to your game and your game setting that week. It is very straightforward and will create positive memories and immersion at your game table. The next thing I'd recommend would be to go ahead and visit gameplaycandles.com and purchase one of our fantastic D&D inspired scented candles. We have 5 scents at the moment that are specific to different environments and different classes that go along with D&D, and we have many, many more scents on the horizon that will be coming out in different quarters throughout 2023. So if not that, then at least check us out at Instagram and TikTok at Gameplay Candles, and we'd love that support. And by the way, all your listeners, if they use Better DM, all capitals, no spaces, if they use Better DM as a code during checkout at our website, they'll get a 15% discount on all of our products.
You're golden. Love that. Also for you listeners, I'm looking at the website right now, and the website's very chic. I love the fire kind of thing.
Thank you.
The banner. That's a wonderful touch. Second, I think that the candles, they're very nice. I think that there's, I don't know, maybe a few years ago, fantasy and being nerds was seen as kind of gaudy in certain ways, but I feel like these are very chic, and I love that.
Yeah. Thank you. We appreciate that. We're going for the chic premium look, and you will make that impact if you light one of these up on your game table.
Exactly. Thank you so much for being here, Alex. Also, Tanner, Alex did send us some samples, so you and I got to get together and light some of those up.
What?
That's amazing. Yes, he sent us the 5 candle sample. So
sure.
I think The Elven Forest. Gosh, I forget the name, but the Elven Forest one was probably my favorite. But anyways, thank you again for joining us, Alex. In conclusion, listener, you got to immerse your players. And to do that, you got to try everything we say. Listen to our podcast. Go to dungeoncandles.com. I hope I said that right.
Gameplaycandles.com.
Gameplay Candles.
Yeah.
Gosh, I should have written that out. Go to gameplaycandles.com. Either way, if you try these things, you're going to be a better DM. We're going to be back next week with another amazing episode. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you.
Listener, until next week, let's go ahead and roll initiative. Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.Rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action,
Shoot one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
drama,
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
and stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.